So welcome, Kim from London. I'm in Bonvo, you're in London, but we are together on the journey, and you will be sharing your wisdom and your experience of many years on the journey and the teaching with us today. And I think you'll be speaking about how two different worldviews, but pointing to the journey of meditation can help us to start the journey and to continue to grow on it. So,
indeed,
please guide us.
Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for being brave to survive 2 talks and to listen to my third one. It needs courage, especially the one that's coming. You're warned. So I already mentioned the nothing but neuroscientists who conclude that everything we experience, especially in meditation, is nothing but a byproduct of the brain. I find that a hard one to take. So here I need to use the skills I have learned as a spiritual counselor. The main task of a counselor is to listen attentively to the other person so that our conversation becomes a meaningful one. And then slowly I'm able to work out how they arrived at that point of view. Now, none of my close friends or counselees are nothing but neuroscientists, so I can't check their reasons for their conclusions. So the following is only my assumption. And to share that with you, and that's why I warned you at the beginning, I need to take you through for a short walk, and it is a short walk, along the countryside of the history of science. It's only a short walk, so please don't switch off yet. So why is there this reluctance among that group of neuroscientists and lots of other people, because we respect scientists and accept their views, that why are they so reluctant to accept that there are other fields of consciousness we can tune into? They accept lots of fields. They accept electromagnetic fields, gravitational fields. They even accept that the gravitational field of the moon influences the tides in our ocean. And what about Wi-Fi? We can use our phone or laptop wherever, and we're surrounded by fields. Anyway, so why is that? Well, it's my friend ego again, isn't it? It's a fear coming from the ego, our survival instinct, fear of the unknown, where the ego feels it's not in control. It doesn't know how to behave. Now, we are taught at school what the world is like, and that knowledge made us feel very secure. We liked the worldview of Descartes and Newton, who stated already in the 17th century that there were mathematical rules laid down by God that governed all of creation and had predictable, never-changing outcomes. Boy, that gives security. Wonderful. But the second point of Descartes is, well, let me just share it with you. Descartes saw nature as divided into the realm of the mind. He called it res cognitans. Everything was done in Latin in those days. And the realm of matter, res extensa. Now, the trouble with that division is that it created a dualistic split between spirit and matter, between body, mind, soul, spirit. between humankind and the rest of creation. According to him and Newton, the human mind is totally separate. Our mind is separate from our body, from the rest of humanity and creation. In fact, in his view, we're isolated observers of the visible universe. That's all. We're just observers. And the only thing we could be sure of was our capacity to think. That was our real proof of existence. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Now that is worrying. That causes total isolation. There is only the level of your own rationality you can deal with, no other levels of consciousness to tune into. And would you let go of your thoughts? Would you like it if someone comes to teach you meditation and said, now the main thing we're going to do is still our mind and clear it of thought? The immediate panic comes up and says, do I still exist when I don't think? Who would go there? Well, there is rescue. Then came in the early 20th century quantum physics. But remember, for 3 centuries, that was our worldview. A worldview, a worldview based on security, but also on isolation. Along came the quantum physics. Names associated with them are Heisenberg, Pauli, and Bohr, and you've heard of them. Now they looked at the subatomic world, not at the visible world. And whereas the rules of Descartes applied to the visible world, they did not apply to the subatomic world. Well, it's easy to understand that that is quite a leap to take. We were confused. These were God-given laws, and they're just saying they don't apply in the subatomic field. It required a total shift in thinking. Moreover, there was the uncertainty principle. The way situations in quantum field would evolve could not be predicted with certainty in every circumstance. They were only potentials, possibilities. And then comes the good point. Depending on we, and note we, our human consciousness, designed the experiments, resulted in different outcome. In fact, Heisenberg said, we have to remember that what we observe is not reality, nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. Wow, that makes us really and truly intricately involved. But the certainty and security has gone. We are left with uncertainty. And even Einstein had difficulty with that. And he stated quite clearly when he was chatting with Niels Bohr, God does not play dice. But the beauty, of course, is that we are no longer unobserved, uninvolved observers, separate from others, from nature, the cosmos, and most of all, from God, from the divine reality. Now, I'm sure, having explained this to you on our little walk, it's difficult. And it's not only difficult to you and me, but it's difficult to understand by many, a very quite clever and intelligent scientists. They were struggling, and they thought the way to deal with it is to go sideways and look at the applications. And the applications are surrounded by laser systems, transistors, now quantum computers, and even, this will make you laugh, the humble toaster is an application from quantum theory. So from isolated observers whose only proof of existence was that they could think, we became totally involved, totally part of the whole. And therefore, meditation with the right brain, as I explained, allowed us to actually tune in. That's quite something, isn't it? No wonder it is a shift, a total shift in thinking. Now, the other shift that happened was since the 17th century, existence of spiritual and intuitive faculties were really ignored. Even the existence of God was considered unscientific, not by Descartes and Newton, but slowly as the centuries progressed, God was considered unscientific, couldn't be proven in the laboratory, and therefore was a primitive leftover of our past. Remember Richard Dawkins' books? Still influential? And the way of thinking which we use in meditation, intuition, from our true center, could also not be proven in a laboratory. So it was irrelevant. So much so that Albert Einstein felt called to stress the really valuable factor is intuition. And the cosmic religious experience is the strongest and noblest driving force behind scientific research. That is a confirmation, isn't it? The result of the difficulty of the quantum theory was that we remained in a reductionist, mechanistic viewpoint. Emphasis on ego and survival. We've talked about that. Qualities related to isolated individuals jostling for survival are highly praised. Power, control, aggressive assertiveness, determination, striving for status, achievement, material gain. Yeah, that's what dominates our world still, and perhaps has contributed to our present crisis. So let's go to this dramatic shift in perspective, which allows us to become aware of other fields of energy and consciousness, of our spiritual dimension, of our being beyond the ego. That is why now meditation more and more is coming to the fore. The The slow percolation of the worldview of the intimately involved part of the whole is percolating through our consciousness. There are different levels of reality. And not only that, all these different levels of reality are actually derived from and connected with an underlying reality. It hasn't really got a name. Science, one of the names is the 0 point field. Doesn't mean much to me. But we've all, in all the religions, have tried to name that field that supports everything that happens. Student, is it a void? No, empty of form, yes, but full of potential. It's also both Christians and Buddhists agree. We are all interlinked through that field and exchange information. To quote a Christian saying, we move and have our being in this sea of energy. So we're all connected. In fact, David Bohm, a scientist, says deep down, the consciousness of mankind is one. Nothing is in itself. All, the human mind, the body, the spirit, we're all part of this infinite ocean of energy. To me, this divine ocean of loving energy, where there are patterns within patterns, relationships within relationships. And the result of this is that now, instead of being meaningless and isolated, we too have deep significance and meaning. We're intimately involved and co-responsible for the whole cosmos. Our behavior affects the rest, the famous butterfly effect. Well, that's the end of our walk through science. But if you think the idea of fields is weird, well, Meister Eckhart in the 14th century said the soul is a field. Now, whether the fields they describe is the same, we do not know. As the Buddhists say, they are fingers pointing at the moon, not the moon itself. We use different mediums of approach. But yet, do they describe the same reality? I leave that question open. Also, at the same time that this quantum theory came up, spiritual and mystical experience again came to the fore. Evelyn Underhill wrote important books on mysticism. Carl Gustav Jung and the American psychologist William James drew attention to different levels of consciousness. Absolutely essential. In Variety of Religious Experience, James said, our normal waking consciousness is but one special type of consciousness, while all about it, parted from it, from the flimsiest of screens, there lie potential forms of consciousness entirely different. When we acknowledge the existence of these different levels of consciousness, then we feel empowered to take up meditation, as it opens the door from the transformation of a narrow consciousness from a narrow, confining one to a wider, inclusive consciousness. And the regular practice of meditation, and I stress regular, allows us to experience really a totally different way of being, the way of being quantum theory has talked about, and a way of tuning in to this field, this ultimate reality. And then we discover, when we are in our own deep center, in the totality of our being, we realize, as John Main somewhere said, that our center is the center of all being. And the beauty is, this is not theory, this is experience. We know intuitively that we are much more than isolating, jostling individuals, but we are constituent parts of the whole. And this view change allows meditation and is proven by meditation, by our experience during meditation. We move from the surface, where Newton and Descartes were, to the depth, where our knowledge, our knowing is informed by the heart rather than the mind. With our mind, we may be focused on the outer world and turn away from our true self. But meditation leads us back to the inner world, the heart, the true self, the Christ within, with its intuition, wisdom, love, compassion. We experience that the divine reality, this field, is love. And we know we are an important aspect of the whole. And our every action, desire, and thought has an effect on everything, as I mentioned. We know intuitively, and that's something we need at this particular time. We know intuitively that we are personally co-responsible for the health of our communities, for the health of creation, and even the whole cosmos. And that's why I said at the beginning of my talks, contemplatives will save the world. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kim, for speaking. Very, very heartening and encouraging. I think, especially for many people today, many of whom are really feeling isolated and, in the field of their own narrow world, or sometimes the walls of their world are closing in on them. Yeah. And if they think of the outside world during this time of confinement, it's often with a feeling of anxiety. Will the jobs be there afterwards? And will the way of connecting with people be changed forever, and so on? So I think the contemplative vision that you're reminding us of here, through the tradition and through science, through mystical tradition and material discoveries, is very encouraging. And I just have one question to ask you, and of course we invite people who are listening to this to send comments and questions. But the question that occurred to me is this. You speak about the discovery. What starts us on the journey of meditation is an intuition or a sense that we are more than what we think, for example.
Yeah.
And that there is this higher, deeper, more ultimate field of consciousness that you were describing. And first of all, as we meditate and as we become more familiar with this field of consciousness, let's call it our spiritual dimension or this energy of the sea of love that you describe. As we become more familiar with that, how does it change the other day-to-day, mundane fields of consciousness that we still have to inhabit and function in? We still have to do the laundry. We still have to make sure we've got a job.
Don't remind me.
There's enough food on the table, and we still have human relationships with their joys and pains and so on. So in this, how does the discovery and the familiarization that takes place through meditation with this larger field of inclusive consciousness, how does that affect our day-to-day development? Is it through a changing sense of self that you were describing, or how would you explain that?
Yes, I think you got it in one. It is a changing view of self. And the point is that if you change your view of self, your attitude that comes out of that is different. When you relate with other people, you relate from that point of compassion, understanding. You know what they're feeling. And instead of saying, oh, stop whinging and whining, so you're stuck at home, who cares? You realize, you empathize immediately. It is the ego that criticizes, not this deeper self. So I think it affects the way you behave. It affects the way you act. And whenever you do or say something, it comes from this point of truth within you. And therefore is valuable, even in any service you may do, as long as it comes from this deeper self rather than from a need you have to be respected, to be loved. And I'm sorry, I'm talking a little bit about next week. It's not the same. So it does change completely who you actually, no, it doesn't change who you are. You become who you really are meant to be. I think that's the way to put it.
Thank you. That's beautifully put. And finally, one other reflection. Many people come to meditation because they want to deal with the symptoms of anxiety or fear or restlessness or doubt, the sort of negative states of mind that can really cause us a lot of suffering and make us feel disconnected. So many people come to meditation with this very pragmatic approach. I want to get rid of these negative aspects of my mind and my emotions, and I want to be able to enjoy life and so on. And that's how many people in a secular society will think of meditation firsthand. But the way you're describing it is from a deeper wisdom tradition. And you speak about this field of consciousness that we discover through meditation as this energy of love. That's a very different perspective. And how and many people would say, oh, well, that sounds good. Don't know what that really means. All I want to do is stop feeling so anxious or have panic attacks. And maybe there's a sea of love out there. But how do you think that understanding, which the wisdom traditions give us, that this inclusive field of consciousness, in which all the other fields, as you describe, are sourced and contained, is that understanding of love relevant to the meditator when they begin?
Oh, absolutely. I don't mind how people start meditation, because it is absolutely valid. Yeah, when you start to deal with your anxieties, You just deal with your stress. Brilliant. And it works. It works. We know that. It absolutely works. And that is a wonderful way to start and to get into a kind of place where so often you have had the same with people. They say, yeah, this is all good, but I can feel a longing. There is more. Yeah, and then they start looking for a deeper dimension. So they don't have to, but if they do, wonderful, because we are all part of this field. And as I said last week, it's remembering. It's remembering.
Sorry? Oh, yeah, okay.
This is being isolated.
Yes,
The world still intrudes.
This is an overlapping of fields of consciousness. I think we'll leave that in. Thank you, Shankar, for that great teaching.
Absolutely. So the whole point is, I think you said somewhere, we relax to meditate, not meditate to relax. But starting with meditation to relax is often a way in, and a very good way in. And then all we need to, there's this little voice within us. There is more. Come on, show me more.
Yes.
And it happens.
And there's always more.
There is always more.
Fortunately, we will have more of you in the next talk. So we'll give you a time to replenish and gather your thoughts for the next session. But thank you, Kim, very much. These are really really helpful, enlightening, and supportive teachings. So thank you very much. See you next time.
And next time, the shadow will start appearing.
Oh, okay. Thanks for the warning.
Exactly. Goodbye for now.
Bye for now. Thank you.